Hello there and welcome to another special episode of SitRep. I'm Tristan Field-Jones, joined by my co-host MJ Banias here. We are closely following the runoff in the Brazilian general election. Now, earlier in the month, what happens is the incumbent, Jair Bolsonaro, was not exactly defeated, but received a smaller percentage of the votes in the general election compared to the main opposition, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. And Bolsonaro has made several claims that have proven to be false so far about electoral fraud. And he has said a few allegations that might be potentially of concern and might cause some disruptions. We will get into all of that throughout this episode and, of course, talk about the consequences and what you need to know as a security professional. And MJ, we are joined by one of our intelligence analysts to kind of break this all down.
That's right. So joining us today on SitRep is Rosanne Hamoud. She is one of our RTC experts and analysts, and she's going to break down for us exactly what's going on in Brazil as the runoff election is only a few days away, and moreover, the implications of what the outcome could possibly be, and really what's going to happen to the country if Jair Bolsonaro takes the election, or what happens if Lula takes the election. So ultimately, we're kind of in this no man's land right now, but Rosanne's going to break it all down for us and kind of explore and explain what the possible events are going to how the possible events are going to play out as we kind of get closer, and as we finally find out who becomes leader of the largest democracy and the largest economy in South America. So Rosanne, welcome to SitRep.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for having me.
So, Rosanne, let's begin with sort of the really simple, just Cole's Notes version of what happened on October 2nd and what's brought us to, right now, days out from the runoff. Okay,
so basically, Lula won with 49% of the votes compared to Bolsonaro, who won 5 points less. In this case, it was around 44%. It was definitely expected Lula to win, but it was not expected to be such a slight difference between both of them. 5 points is basically nothing compared to other elections in Brazil. So between both of them, they got 90% of the votes.
We know that tension already exists between the right-leaning Bolsonaro and the left-leaning Lula, and the country itself seems to be pretty divided down the middle between right and left. Ultimately, this runoff's going to happen in a few days. We're going to finally have a decision made, and it is going to seemingly be like a very, very fine line of who takes majority here. What are you looking at, RTC? What are you looking at when you kind of look at this election from the RTC perspective? Like, what is everyone kind of waiting for? What is everyone kind of preparing for, I guess, on the team?
Honestly, right now, we are waiting for the elections because we're expecting, depending on who wins, we're expecting to see a lot of protests, blockades, and maybe a coup. So that's something that we're actually looking closely because, let's say, if Bolsonaro wins, Lula has openly said that he is going to accept the election results and he's not going to fall for any protests or any violence. On the other hand, Bolsonaro has said that if Lula wins, he is not going to accept the results of the elections, and he is going to call on his protesters to go on the streets and start fighting for the right of count over. Or he's also saying that the military is backing him up, so there might be a coup. So it depends on basically who would win. So as I said, we're looking for. It depends on the scenario of who would win.
Well, and with the margin of error being so tight, it really is difficult to predict a winner at this point, frankly. Rosanne, you, from an intelligence analyst perspective and looking at this as part of the real-time coverage team, how serious is the threat of violence in the aftermath of this second round, especially if da Silva ends up defeating Bolsonaro? Is that a really significant concern, or again, is it still too early to tell at this point?
As of right now, he has, in this case, Bolsonaro has openly said that he is going to call for protests because he does believe there is going to be a fraud. So that is the reason why I've said that protests might break out. I think in both cases, protests definitely will break out, whoever will win. Are they going to be violent? That is the question. It depends on what the candidate and the winner will say.
When we think about really the political and cultural division in Brazil, it seems like Lula has a lot more of an uphill fight. It seems Bolsonaro has really secured the right very well. He's secured a sort of evangelical Christian sort of fundamentalism within the country, and it's really acting as a foothold for him. If Lula does win, Lula's going to have to go into, one, a divided Brazil, but secondly, a Brazil that by default doesn't believe that he legitimately won the election. And, as Bolsonaro has kind of secured, this man is also sort of not chosen by, the divine or God or whatever to rule, just like sort of he claims, he may have been. Do you think that if Lula wins, we are going to see some sort of coup attempt? Do you think there's going to be, beyond protests, is there going to be some sort of violent action that will attempt to bring down Lula's government and insert either Bolsonaro back as leader or some other kind of leader within this kind of fundamentalist right group?
I don't think a coup would happen. I'll tell you why. The last coup that happened was in 1964, and it was backed by the U.S. In this case, Biden's government has basically said that they will support the results of the elections, regardless of who would win the elections. So they will support its candidate, and they do not believe there's going to be fraud. So in this case, also for a coup to happen, he would have to have the support of the military, the army in Brazil. And the military is divided. They are not stating that they are supporting either or in this case. So it's very hard for them, like for me to see a scenario where a coup would be taking place.
Well, and so when we look at the political posturing, I guess, which is the best way of describing this, Bolsonaro may be saying a bunch of these claims and, talking about how the military will support him and whatever it may be. But the fact of the matter is, as you say, Roseanne, we haven't really seen that support come out from the military. They haven't stated, we're going to be in favor of whichever candidate. So even if Bolsonaro makes some potentially concerning claims regarding the election outcome, there's, even if he outright calls for a coup, which who knows, maybe not, that may not happen because that also depends on the military and the other forces at play.
Correct. Yes, 100%. In this case, as I said, it's not clear that he has support of the military. Number one, he does not have support from international governments. So the U.S. would not back him up, and the countries in South America would not back him up either. So he really doesn't have international support and even domestic support.
Regardless of whether the military gets involved or just stays completely out of this, when it comes to that aspect where you have, the president making these claims and putting fuel on the fire for his supporters, is that the much bigger threat, like seeing riots or seeing maybe some major political institution in Brazil under siege if Bolsonaro refuses to accept his defeat, if that is the outcome?
That's exactly what I would say, because Bolsonaro is known as the tropical Trump. So he tends to have that type of message. When you actually listen to Bolsonaro, he has a lot of things in common with Trump's speech. In fact, Trump endorsed him not long ago, and he was telling the Brazilian citizens to go and vote for him. During Trump's government, he had a very close relationship with Brazil and Bolsonaro's government. So Trump is running for re-elections in 2024, and he is saying, vote for him because we're going to be a good team, as Trump usually refers to other governments. And if he does win, I would say his supporters would go out on the streets and protest. Would it get any violent? I don't think so, because as I said, this has not happened in Brazil in decades. So even if he calls people to go and protest, I would say that would stay that way, especially because Lula would not want to start his government in a violent way. So I don't see it as a possible scenario for it to escalate.
We have this. We just talked about Trump, so let's kind of. I want to shift to politics, like sort of more global politics here, because I think there's this sort of general idea within maybe North America that the Brazilian election doesn't really affect me. Who cares? It's so far away. There's war in Ukraine. The Middle East is on fire. Brazil is like the least of my problems. But the election in Brazil will definitely have some significant geopolitical impact. Lula has openly stated, if I become president, I will reopen ties with a whole bunch of other countries in South America. I will kind of bolster Brazil's sort of more global presence. Bolsonaro, on the other hand, said he's going to become more insular, right? He is not interested in dealing with the rest of South America on any kind of political or economic stage. He is very much just kind of interested in securing relationships with a Republican United States of America, potentially with Vladimir Putin in Russia, and sort of any kind of other authoritarian style regime that's out there. I guess my question is, what are we looking and what's RTC looking at to sort of what's going to happen to South America when we have a result here? Like, do we have sort of any predictions of how the economy or the trade or even the safety and security of South America is going to be altered by a Lula or a Bolsonaro win?
Okay, so let's look at both scenarios. If Lula wins, South America, the majority of countries in South America are now left-wing. If you look at Argentina, Venezuela, Colombia, so the majority of countries right now in South America are left-wing. So Lula in this case would face a stronger support from countries in South America. On the other hand, Bolsonaro would not have the same scenario because he's basically not done a good job in the past few years holding relations with the rest of the leaders in South America and even the BRICS, which I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with, Russia. He's not, even though he's hold relations with the BRICS, is not in the state that it was when Lula first created it. So it is expected that if Lula wins, he's going to revive the BRICS again. And relations with countries in South America would definitely get better. Also, he also has been mentioning throughout his campaign that he wants to create a common currency for the countries in South America. He wants to call it the sol. That's something similar that Chavez did when he was in power over 10 years ago. So he is coming with this idea that let's create a stronger force for countries in South America. So how would this affect? In a lot of ways, in terms of economics, in terms of political. As I said, if we expect a stronger force in South America, I'm expecting a lot of treaties in terms of the economic sector. I'm expecting a lot of trades, also applying to the BRICS. In terms of Bolsonaro, we don't see that as often. He's really not tried anything similar to trades or any negotiation with countries in South America, or even, as I said, countries like the US or European countries.
From in a globalized world, that's not how, the universe actually works anymore. We can't really run a country kind of in this insular way. So it's going to be interesting to see if Bolsonaro does pull out a victory, how South America is really going to pivot to another 4 years without Brazil.
I was just saying that in terms of Bolsonaro, he doesn't have support. Sadly, he doesn't have external support. And in this case, the way the economy is worldwide, business-wise, he does need external support. And he's not really doing anything in terms of that. He even is going to be facing a lot of internal conflicts because he's going to get a Brazil that is divided. It's very polarized. So, in his defense, he has a stronger support in Congress. So he won majority of the Congress on October 2nd. Lula, in this case, he would have to face opposition in Congress. So if Bolsonaro wants to keep this idea of domestic and I just want to focus on Brazil, at least he's going to have support from Congress, but he's going to face a lot of opposition, external opposition and internal.
What should security professionals be paying attention to as we brace for the second round here in this phase of the election? Because it sounds to me as if, Roseanne, there will be some form of protests. Because at the end of the day, a lot of people are probably going to be unhappy with the election result. So at the very least, what should security professionals be watching out for as we wait for the results of the second round to be made public?
It depends. It depends on where the protests take place. I am assuming that the majority of the protests are going to happen in the major cities of Brazil. So what I'm afraid of, if the protests get violent, there might be looting, curfews, and there's aspects that Lula is trying to avoid. That's why he's saying, I will accept whatever results is, because I don't want things to get bad in Brazil. It's already enough that the economy is shaken in Brazil, and there's a wider gaps than it was years ago between the higher class and lower class. So the idea as of right now for Bolsonaro is to call for protests. But the other side is trying to avoid that just to keep stability in the country. And he would be an example of, like, this would push other countries in South America to protest as well. So I think whatever happens in Brazil is going to create a great impact in other countries in the region.
Right. I was gonna sort of just mention that you have already, as you said, there's a lot of countries that are already leaning left heavily in South America. Not only that, you're going to have, the diaspora from Brazil living in major cities all around the world, whether it's, Toronto, New York, London, whatever. You're going to have potential protests occurring in the anti-Bolsonaro camp or the pro-Bolsonaro camp, as well as the anti-Lula or the pro-Lula camps, kind of potentially clashing in cities all around the world. How my gosh, how do you kind of manage all this? Like, I mean, I can't imagine kind of waking up the morning of October 30th. You get yourself your coffee. You got, like the hat with the two coffee cups and the straws, running in, and you're just like sitting at the computer and you're like, all right, it's election day. It's go time. Let's do this. How is RTC going to prepare to potentially monitor significant unrest over the sort of the coming weeks?
Okay, so for October 30th, that's actually very interesting because we're going to have coverage throughout the day for any protest or blockades, because people might tend to start closing streets to prepare for for whoever is going to be rallying as the winner or the loser, because usually they do hold rallies after the elections are out there. So we are expecting, and one thing important that we have to mention is that elections are mandatory, voting is mandatory in Brazil. So we're going to expect Brazilians all over the world going to the embassy or consulate in whatever country they reside to vote. So we're going to see people moving across the world just for these elections. And a lot of them tend to wait outside the embassy or consulate or whatever they go to vote just for the results. So I wouldn't be surprised to notice that there are protests already breaking out at 6 or 7 o'clock when the elections come out. We are going to keep an eye on the embassies, especially where the majority of Brazilians are across the world. And the idea is to, as I said, monitor and alert clients of any disruption or anything that might break out.
So if we put kind of a summary on all this, we are in the coming days expecting some form of protest. The big question mark is how far those protests go. If we see some sort of violence or some sort of insurrection. But what you're saying, Roseanne, is that the possibility of, again, a January 6th type insurrection that we saw in the U.S., you're saying that is likely, at the moment, that's likely low. So we're fortunately not expected to see violence, maybe a lot of heated discussions, if you will, and a lot of folks out there expressing their opinions, but violence is expected to be minimal at the moment.
Correct, yes. Because we don't have any indicators as of right now that violence would take place. Yes, there's going to be sadness. There's going to be disappointment from either side, but not to the extent that people, or you don't even see Brazilians in the street saying, oh, I'm going to fight. Or no, you don't see anything. You don't see that environment happening in Brazil as of right now.
However, should Bolsonaro lose, there is always that potential for violence.
Correct. Yes.
We know, for example, Bolsonaro has loosened gun laws. We know more Brazilians own firearms than they ever have had in history. So I guess my concern is, are we going to see potentially not a formal coup or insurrection from the Bolsonaro camp, but are we going to see gun violence, mass shootings? We have already seen multiple people die as a result of the initial election on October 2nd. There have been multiple fatalities due to violence in the streets. So I guess I'm sitting here more as kind of the hand-wringing Canadian who's nervous about Brazil potentially exploding. What should people put in place from a safety perspective, from a harm reduction perspective? October 30th is going to hit. People live in Brazil and the major cities, especially. What's your sort of advice to them? This is how you should stay safe. This is what you should do. Go.
Okay. Okay. So first, let's say the scenario that there is violence, that people are protesting and you hear mass shootings happening in the streets. In my opinion, it's not going to escalate because the police will not be part of this. They will try to calm things down, especially because in the case if Lula is elected, he's going to try to calm things down. He's going to try to keep it as quiet and as calm as possible. As we don't know exactly what Bolsonaro would say, but as I said, he doesn't have military or even a high police acceptance for any violence. But in the case, as I said, if the violence breaks out, I don't think it would escalate to a point of January 6th in the US, for example. And what would I do if I was Brazilian? If violence breaks out, or I would actually expect the results from home to avoid any type of violence in my way, especially major cities. I would say Sao Paulo, Rio, those places. I would say stay home, wait for the results, and either candidate you support, just wait for the results and take action if needed. What do I say by this? Take actions if needed. If you see the news that violence does break out, I would try to stay home and not go anywhere because, of course, you might get hurt, and that's not the idea. And the more people that you see in the street, the more chances for violence. So if something happens, the police already have a plan that they are going to try to calm people down. And it's not like, for example, Trump back in the day, he did say, bring your guns, fight for this because this is fraud. In this case, Bolsonaro, he's the religious type of guy. So he's going to say, protest, but he's going to expect the military to back him up more than the people going and fighting against each other.
Roseanne, I guess the big question then remains, why are these elections so important to not just South America, not just the Americas in general, but the world? What is the global impact of this October 30th election?
So Brazil is the fourth largest democracy in the world. It is also the largest country in South America. It has the largest forest worldwide. And it is a member of many alliances. As I said, the BRICS. It is also part of Mercosur. Whatever comes out after these elections is going to play a big role in the U.S. and the BRICS and in countries in South America. Because as I said, we as South examples, so the way they do their economy, how they handle situations. So worldwide, people are looking at these elections as an example of how it would be in the future. Also, whatever strategies Lula or Bolsonaro will take in the future will impact economies. For example, relations with the U.S. U.S. Imports a lot of things from Brazil. The BRICS, what would happen to the members of BRICS? What would Lula or Bolsonaro's strategy would be in the future to make the alliance stronger, especially now during Ukraine and Russian war, the invasion. How is Lula or Bolsonaro gonna approach this? Also, countries in South America, since as I've said, the majority of countries in South America are also now part of the left wing. How would they approach their relations, internal foreign policies with Brazil? So yes, those are one of the reasons why I think these elections are very important. Everyone should be looking after the aftermath.
Roseanne, thank you very much. Your expertise in this area is astounding. And for all the listeners at home, if you are a client of Samdesk or not, just know that Roseanne will be monitoring this very closely. She is our South America expert at Samdesk. And I got to be honest, I'd rather have no one else monitoring the situation than you. So thank you so much for what you do. And thank you for coming on the show today. Where can people find you if they want to follow you on social media or any websites, anything like that? Go ahead and plug yourself, Roseanne.
Thank you. And honestly, the first place where you should be looking into is Samdesk's website. We're going to be creating streams the day prior to elections, the actual day of the elections, and afterwards to see what can happen. So I would definitely encourage everyone to go on Samdesk's website and monitor the Brazil stream, especially protests, blockades, curfews, looting, like all those events that would take place on the days prior and after the elections.
So, Roseanne, thank you very much. Appreciate your insight when it comes to this. And certainly we'll chat again depending on what happens here, because this story isn't over yet.
Correct. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much, guys.
Okay. I'm Tristan Field-Jones, joined by MJ Banias. Thank you for listening to this special episode of SitRep. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email sitrep@samdesk.io. Follow us on Twitter. Look us up on LinkedIn. Again, look up Samdesk. That's all one word. Until next time, stay safe out there.